Hi, I'm Brandea Miller, just a girl who feels like she barely survived from being 18 to 29, from an abusive marriage to divorce, pregnant with my sweet girl to the mom of an angel, and this was all before I was even 20. Since then, I married the high school sweetheart, had a sweet boy, wrote a few books, blogs, and in 9 years, 3 states, 4 cities, 13 homes, 2 hotels, 1 angel girl, 1 sweet boy, a bunch of jobs, and an insane amount of love and laughter. Here I am, 30 years old, talking to you, sharing my wisdom from the infinite lessons I have learned while still learning to navigate around the things that I haven't. Come along and navigate with me. There is room here for your joy, your grief, your hormones, your emotions, your friendships, relationships, heartbreak, and all of the other things that come along with being in your 30s. Hey guys, welcome back to the In Your 30s podcast with your host, Brandea Miller. My 30s have been crazy lately. So I dropped the first episode and I was so excited about continuing the next week, and I just needed to take a step back. We have a lot of stuff going on in our life. And it just needed my attention more. We're finally getting to a point where we've been dealing with some problems from my husband's job since the beginning of the year. And throughout the year, they just are increasingly getting worse. So we started our year out finding out that they did not pay any of his taxes. They did not withhold taxes from his checks at all last year. And if you do not know, it is an employee's responsibility to provide a valid W-4 form to their employer. However, if an employee does not provide that form, then you are to withhold at a single or married filing separately rate. That's the law. That is literally the IRS saying, hey, this is what you got to do. And somehow when my husband filled out his W-4, it was marked exempt, even though nothing else on it was filled out, which technically made it invalid anyways, because it has to be properly filled out all the way for it to be a valid form. But they didn't care that it wasn't filled out all the way properly, and they certainly did not care that exempt W-4s expire at the end of that calendar year. So we contacted them and we were like, hey, there seems to be a problem. I noticed no taxes were taken out. We at one point requested a copy of his W-4, which is when we found out that somehow it had just been typed exempt and that was it. We requested to change it because for whatever reason, they don't allow you access to your own W-4. Crazy. It was just literally one thing after another. And they refused to take responsibility for it, basically. So I'm not happy about it. My husband's not happy about it. We've been dealing with this since February. And basically the whole thing is we owe over $8,000 in taxes if we don't get this taken care of. So I'm very, very, very happy to say that we are working on getting this taken care of, and that now finally we're getting to a point where we can. My husband needed to find a new job because absolutely no doubt they would retaliate if they found out that he reported them to the IRS and the Department of Justice while still employed there. They would 100% retaliate. And I know this because, one, the new managers that are there are super extra petty. And two, because they currently are showing how little they have concern or care for any of the employees, their problems, or getting resolutions. So we've been dealing with this tax problem. Basically, we're just waiting till he gets, like, starts his new job. And so he found a new job. It's been like a month-long process of getting him actually on the job, and hopefully he starts the 2nd. On top of that, we've had to deal with his job withholding money from his check for no reason. So last month his check was $363 short, and my husband is a very, very numbers-oriented person when it comes to his paycheck. We literally watch every single little bit. You know, like when he was selling cars, he would write down each of the deals, and then he would ask how much he made on it and write it down. And he would take his notebook every single month at the beginning of the next month and make sure that his commission matched his deals. Like, and it was a good thing because we've caught so many quote unquote mistakes. However, last month his check was short $363 or something. And when he went to report it to the GM, because they have a new GM, he's only been there like 2 months, he was like, okay, well, I'll pass it along to corporate. Basically, corporate didn't do anything about it. My husband asked him again, and he basically blamed the previous manager over that department and said that that manager did the math wrong and told them the wrong numbers. Now, it's very important to keep in mind that since he's moved to service, he's not really had a problem with the manager making a mistake. It's usually corporate and payroll because they're morons, absolute morons. And so, of course, they're blaming the manager. This manager was since fired like the week before, of course. And so it's been a whole situation. And when you think, honest to God, that it could not get worse, he's literally been fighting with them for like a week now for a check that they owe him for referrals. On top of that, they bought my car from me in February when we bought our new car. And we traded in the Range Rover. And so once that was done, I thought, we're done. We don't have to deal with the Range Rover no more. No more problems, because it spent more time in the shop than it did on the road. And even though we didn't pay a lot for it, like, we got a super great deal. Actually, a very unbelievable deal. But we got a super great deal on it, but we just didn't want to put no more time and money into it because I was just tired of being without a vehicle half the time. We had it for 2 years. Well, I had it for 2 years, and I probably drove it 8 to 10 months out of the whole 2 years, literally. It was bad. And so the thing about it is, we traded it in because it messed up. And we were like, you know what? We're not fixing it no more. We're over it. We got a new car. Thought that was the end of it. I knew that they had problems loading it off to someone else. But that wasn't my problem, basically. They knew what they were getting when we traded it in. It wasn't like it hadn't been in their shop so many times. But so they were having trouble, like, offloading it to the next person. And, of course, a couple months after, they take the car in on trade, I get a letter from the DMV. Well, I call them because it's a letter for my taxes on the vehicle that I sold, like 2 months, 3 months before that. And I call them and I say, hey, I don't have this vehicle no more. I sold it. What do I need to do? And they were like, well, if you sold it, you should have turned your tag in. I said, okay, that's my bad. I didn't know that because in the state of Tennessee, at least when we lived there, we were never instructed to return our tag to the DMV. And so it was just a whole weird situation. And especially since in North Carolina, we paid way more for our tag than you would ever pay in Tennessee. So it was just all around not knowing and a mistake, which was fine. And so then the woman, she had like a weird feeling, I guess. She was like, let me check on something for you though, real quick. You said you got rid of this car. I said, yes. I sold it to a dealership. And I have a whole new car now. So, like, I don't need my tag. She said, okay, let me check something. And she ran the VIN number, and it was still, like, 2-3 months later, in my name. The title had never been switched over. Which, if you don't know, that's illegal. I don't know if it's illegal in every state, but I know for a fact it's illegal in North Carolina because the dealership across the street from my husband's job, where he actually used to work, the Nissan, they currently have a ton of charges, legal charges filed against their employees and them. And when I say a ton, I mean over 400 of them. And it's called title jumping, which basically means that you buy a car from someone and you don't register it in your name to keep the owner numbers low. And then you just sell it to them and give them the title that's in the previous owner's name. That's basically what it is. And so it's great for dealerships because it helps them get more for their money because it's had less owners. You know, people look for that stuff. But the thing about it is it's illegal as hell. And his job is guilty of it. So I get to deal with that personally because it's my vehicle the moment he quits. I have to send in a complaint to the North Carolina Department of Transportation and the North Carolina DMV License and Theft Bureau because that is the department that deals with this and will press charges and investigate and all of that stuff. So it's been crazy. And the funny thing is, if it was just that one situation at that one time, I would be like, okay, you know what, whatever. But August 28th, they sent me a letter. The DMV, the License and Theft Bureau, sent me a letter letting me know that my Range Rover was towed and that I could call the company and get it. So 8 months later, it's still not, the title still has not been switched into anyone's name, which, if you don't know, you're legally liable for any vehicle that's in your name. I don't want to be liable for a vehicle that I don't have access to, I don't know who has access to it, how they're driving it, what they're doing with it, etc. So I had my husband call the tow yard that they sent me the information for in the letter, and I just had him ask like what condition it was in, how much it would cost to get it out, etc., etc. They said $1,600 to get it out, which was more than I paid for it, you guys. And then basically they said that someone bought it from the dealership or the auction house or whatever. They didn't put the title in their name, and they were driving it, and it broke down, which is not funny. It's sad. But at the same time, the funny part is they didn't even want to fix it either. So they just left it on the side of the road and had it towed. And when your car ends up towed because it's like an abandoned vehicle or whatever, they run the VIN number and contact you like they did me. So we have been truly putting up with a lot. And I am so ready to get these reports in and report these situations, get some results, and just not have to deal with this no more. Fingers crossed that my husband gets to start his job on the 2nd, because if not, I'm going to absolutely lose my ever-loving mind. I'm so over it. We need this job. It's double what he makes now, guaranteed, plus commission. It's double what he makes now with his commission, so, and his salary. So we really need this, and it's just, it's just been a rough couple of weeks, I guess, just because of everything that we're gearing up for, basically. And then, of course, we had our anniversary. We had Alicia's birthday. I do not work on my kids' birthdays. Mine, yeah, I'll work on mine. I don't care. But my kids, off limits. So it's just been nuts. We're literally just praying every second of the day that God comes through with this job and he can finally start and we can just put ourselves in a better position. And we're also praying that we can get these issues with the car and the dealership dealt with. The issues with them taking money out of his check and just lying about it, we're probably not even going to bother with, because they're going to change the numbers. They're going to make it look however they want it to look, and they have access to all the paperwork to do that. And if you think that a dealership will not change paperwork, you are wrong, because I am literally a dealership wife, and I have heard of the Nissan in town that's under super scrutiny and got all these charges. If they only knew what other things they've done, things that have been changed, there'd be a lot more people that would have charges against them, and there would be a lot more charges. It's insane. Dealerships they pay our bills because my husband works at one, but I physically hate dealerships. And I tell my husband all the time, I hate your job. I hate some of the people that he works with, like the new GM that he's got. He's awful. The new manager that he's got, he pushed an old guy down, literally pushed a 72-year-old down on the ground because of whatever reason. I don't even know. Which that put the whole community, we live in a very small town, so that did not please the community, especially when they started tagging the company in posts, and like it's so bad to the point that a dealership a little over an hour away, my husband knows someone who works there, and they've asked about these situations and stuff that's going on, because it's not news. It's just word travels fast, and they're scummy, and that's just how it is. But also, there's not a whole lot of things that pay like a dealership does if you're at the right dealership and you have the skills to sell or whatever it is that you're doing. So you got to take the good with the bad, but the bad has just been weighing on me lately, and it's truly been exhausting. So I hated dropping that first episode, and I hated not being able to muster up the motivation, I guess, to pull myself away from my real life and just take, a little while and record new episodes. I just needed to kind of step away from things, because it's been nuts. And 99% of the time, I will not put myself in a position that causes me this much stress or anxiety. But honestly, this isn't really a situation I have any control over. It's my husband's job. It's his career. I'm not going to tell him, hey, you can't work somewhere. And especially when it does pay the bills and it does give us a decent life. But it would be nice if it gave us a decent life and didn't screw us at the same time. Just to be honest. But yeah, so it's just crazy. It's just been nuts lately. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Fingers crossed. Keep us in your prayers or your vibes. Send us all the good vibes. Whatever it is that you do and you believe, send us all the good, because we are going to need it. So with all of that being said, We are going to talk about something different than what we were originally going to talk about today. Sorry, I needed to get that off my chest and rant and rave and catch you guys up, I feel like. So, we were going to talk about finding joy in rough seasons of motherhood in your 30s. But the issue is we really ain't got time for that today. So, now we're going to talk about taking charge of your life. And I feel like we can get through this topic rather quickly today, and this won't be an overly extended episode, but just bear with me. So, today I want to talk to you guys about taking charge of your life. And honestly, that can be a lot of different things, especially when you're in your 30s. We're now in this stage where I think even though we feel like we should have more done, we're actually finally getting our footing. We're just getting started. We're getting our footing. And I feel like a lot of us are starting to kind of figure out what direction we really want to go. Maybe you're not there yet. If not, it'll come. Give it time. But I feel like a lot of people my age, a lot of people I know anyways, are really just getting their footing. And they're just getting started, and they're really building that career in education, or they're really focusing on, actually homeschooling their kid and, hands-on learning at home. And I think a lot of us are starting businesses because now we are figuring out what we're passionate about, and we're just finally getting to a point where we can just start figuring things out. We're not figured out. We still got a long ways to go, but we're getting there. And what I love so much about that in this season of so many of us just getting our footing, just getting started, figuring out what we want, figuring out what direction we even need to go. Like, we just are finally putting some pieces of the puzzle together. Even though it's not the full puzzle, we're putting some pieces together. And what I love about that so much is that it gives us the perfect opportunity to completely take charge. So maybe you guys can't relate, but when I turned 18, 19, 20, I felt like I had spent so much time in my life being pushed to live my life a certain way and do certain things and go in certain directions. And so I spent a lot of my 20s bouncing around and feeling lost. And I'm still pretty squirrely when it comes to finding new things that I love to do and expanding and exploring. I'm still experiencing life and learning. I just like to do it hands-on. But I felt like when I turned 18, I was supposed to go to college, then get married, then have kids. Like, there was an order, and this had been drilled into me basically my whole life. My mom was a teen mom, and that was the last thing that she ever wanted for any of us. And so after spending so much time hearing how it's supposed to be done and it being basically drilled into my head, I never really felt like life was my own. Like, my life was not for me. It was for basically everything else, I feel like. I lived my life for my kids. I had kids really young. And I lived my life for, my spouse. And I just did not look out for myself, basically. I was like, you know what? This is how everyone says it should be. So this is how I'm going to do it. And I wish I would have had the courage to step back and say, no, this is my life. There's not a set guideline or rule book or a set order that I have to do things in life. And I don't have regrets per se, But there are situations that I wish I would have done differently, because I could have done it differently and it still turned out the same. It still would have got the end result that I got, and my life would probably basically be the same, but it would have saved me a little bit of problems, just to be honest. So today, I want to talk to you guys about taking charge of your own life. And I want to talk to you guys about some of the things that you can do to take care or take charge of your own life, because it's your life. And we're 30 years old. We're just getting started. We have a whole ton of life ahead of us. But you cannot thrive in a life that is for you when you're living in someone else's design. And by that, I mean, you're not going to move into your mom's house and it be your absolute perfect dream house built specifically for you. She built it for her. She customized it for her. You'd have to change things. And that's what taking charge of your life is. It's making changes where you need to make changes and asserting authority. Now, I'm a firm believer that you can assert authority over your life without being a complete butt wipe, just to be honest. I know that it's not cool. I know it's trendy to completely treat other people like crap and say that you're defending yourself or standing up for yourself or taking charge or whatever it is that you want to say you're doing with your life. I get that society tells you it's way cooler if you're mean to that person when you do it. But, little fun fact, it's actually not. And you never have to live with that sin or that guilt that comes with treating other people like trash just because you feel like you have that right now. So I know that's what society tells you, but don't listen to them. Listen to me. Trust me. I'm telling you the right thing. I promise. You can set boundaries. You can cut people out. You can take charge. You can take authority over your life without causing someone else a problem or further damaging a relationship that you have with someone by treating them meanly. And you may be wondering how. You know, I know personally that it is very difficult when someone is pushing your buttons and they're crossing boundaries and they're basically ignoring the lines that you draw. It can be very, very hard to be nice to a human being like that. It's important to understand that usually people cross boundaries out of love. And while it's not a good excuse, that is what makes it so hard for them to understand when you don't accept that behavior. Because even when it's toxic, even when it's poisonous, that is the way that they choose to show love. And everybody is not well developed. Everybody has not matured emotionally. So some people, the way they show love is crossing boundaries. A good example of that is grandparents. Grandparents who go overboard for birthdays, Christmases, after you've asked them not to. Grandparents who give candy or buy junk food after you've asked them not to. They're trying to show that they love their grandkids to their grandkids. It's not anything personal to you. It's that they want something that they can't have, and they are not emotionally mature enough to accept that it's not appropriate and that you're not okay with it. So what ends up happening is they take this as a personal attack, and now you've got an even bigger problem. And when you go towards this mean on top of what people are already seeing as a personal attack, because they're just trying to love you, right? That's just how they think. That's not a justification, and it doesn't always make it okay. But that's what those type of people think. I'm trying to love them and they don't appreciate it. So when you go into a situation where someone's already going to feel like they're personally being attacked, and you take anger into it, or you take harsh words into it, then all you're doing is raising the stakes. Because here's the thing. When you go into this and you set your boundary, you're going to hurt their feelings. That's fine. Sometimes that's what needs to be done. It's going to hurt their feelings, even if you're nice about it, because like I said, they're seeing this as a personal attack on the way that they are trying to be in your life or your child's life or whatever. But the thing about it is, those people throughout life can mature. They can eventually mature, and they can eventually understand that can be changed over time. It's probably not going to be overnight, obviously, but over time, it's something that they can work on if they want to, and it can be changed. What I mean by you're raising the stakes is because when we go into a situation that's already high risk for hard emotions, then you come in with anger. Sometimes we get out of hand. Sometimes we say things we don't mean. Sometimes we slip up. And sometimes people take something we said the wrong way. There are just so many ways that bringing anger into this situation can raise the stakes. And so when you go into this situation with anger, you raise the stakes, and boundaries can change based on the seasons. People can mature emotionally, but words can never be taken back. It's just something you can't do. And we go in with anger, we say what we are feeling at the time, and we damage this relationship that otherwise could have been repaired with some work. So one of the biggest ways that I have taken charge of my life is I go into situations with a different mindset now. I go into situations with a calmer head. And the thing about it is, when you go into a situation with a calm head and you are not reacting, you have the power. Recently, me and my grandmother got into it, and this actual situation I don't regret because it needed to be said, but I wish I would have approached it differently. You know what I'm saying? So, we got into it because my grandmother is bedridden and my mom is taking care of my grandmother. It's basically just my mom. My brother does help out, but my sister can't get over there all the time and be there, and I live 3 hours away. My aunt lives in a totally different state across the country, and every now and then one of my cousins and his wife will come and help and whatever, but it's not been often. It's not been enough, basically, to take the weight of this off of my mom. So my mom will go downstairs and take care of her, and my grandmother will just treat her like crap. And this is something that's been happening for years before she was even bedridden. She has always kind of talked to my mom, talked down to her, and I just got sick of it. And I first did approach the situation with a calm head, and I later just lost it. I called her for something totally different. I don't even remember what I called her for, and she brought the situation up, and she said something about my mom, and I snapped. I literally snapped, and I was just like, you should be glad that she's even there. No one else cares enough to be there. I certainly don't. I'm 3 hours away. I was awful to her. And my biggest problem with this situation is I wish I would have approached it with a calm head all the way. I wish I would have been like, you know what? I don't want to talk about this. I'm going to get off the phone. And I would not have approached it until I was able to articulate what I wanted to say without just being mean. And now, oddly enough, actually, I didn't even think about this story when I started this topic on this podcast. It just came to mind. But oddly enough, our relationship now, because of that one fight where neither one of us had a cool head, is not the same. And it kind of does bother me. Like, it hurts my feelings a little bit, but at the same time, it doesn't. I don't know. It's hard to explain. But basically, we went to Knoxville after that situation. I went and seen my grandmother, and we talked or whatever. And my husband and I made her some cornbread muffins. Like, everything seemed fine. And then we left town. We didn't hear from her. I did not hear from her on my birthday. Lucas did not hear from her on his birthday. And then on her birthday, I sent her a text to tell her happy birthday. I talked to her. She asked how Lucas's birthday was. She did not ask how mine was. Like, we used to be partners in crime, and this one situation actually truly did change our relationship. And I don't know if it's repairable, and I don't know if I even want to repair it, but I do know that it could have been handled better. So while I'm still learning to fully take control of my life and take charge, one of the ways that I really am focusing on is going into situations with a calm head. It's just so important. And one of the things that I do, though, to implement having a calm head is, like I said before, I found out about the situation and how my grandmother was talking to my mom, and the day that she had hurt her feelings, it was like my daughter's birthday, and my mom really struggles with my daughter's death. So, like, it literally was just, it was just the whole situation. But when I heard about the situation, I took a step back and I sat on it for a moment. And I would be lying if I said that there weren't times when I was thinking about it that I just wanted to call her and yell, and that wasn't my original goal. I slipped up. I made a mistake because I'm human, but my original goal was to continue to address it with a calm head. And so, yeah, that's one of the ways that I do that. And I'll be honest with you, most of the time it works. But in my life currently, I'm not in a position where I deal with people who really push those boundaries or push a certain idea onto me. My family is pretty understanding of where I stand and my beliefs. We don't see eye to eye on things, some things anyways. But we also will try to avoid topics that will trigger really hard emotions. So basically, if you can, either avoid the situation, avoid the person, or just take a step back and sit on it, sleep on it. There's nothing wrong with addressing something a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now. However long it takes you to process those emotions where you can maturely articulate the problem and either come up with a resolution or an understanding. Because some things you just can't solve. You just have to have an understanding until that other person matures. But there's no shame in addressing something later on. Everything does not have to be addressed right there in the heat of the moment. And truthfully, that's really where you lose your power. Anytime that emotions are high, the stakes are high. That's the way I look at it. Anytime that you have high emotions and you react in an emotional way, you are gambling with your relationship with that person. And sometimes we are gambling with relationships we don't care about. That's fine. But most of the time, it's the people that we love the most that are trying to control our lives or run our lives or live vicariously through us because they never got to do what we get to do. So definitely go into it with a calm head. If you have to, sleep on it. If you have to, address it in a month, address it in 2 months, whenever you're emotionally mature enough to responsibly address it without raising the stakes. Now, another way that I highly suggest you take charge of your life is by taking accountability. And you may not see how those two things connect, but hear me out. Because the thing about it is, most people look at being in charge as being the boss, being able to do whatever you want to do and not having to answer to nobody. And let's face it, taking accountability is basically the opposite. And so you may not see how they connect, but when you go and you do something wrong, that situation has now been fed and it now has power. And depending on what you do, because let's face it, we're adults, and a lot of our mistakes now have really intense consequences, like fines, jail time, stuff like that. But no matter, depending on what you do, it could come back to haunt you. You know, it's something that can be held over your head. So when you address your shortcomings, when you address your sins, I guess we can call them, it takes the power away from it. You know, being upfront and being honest about those situations, that those mistakes that you have made, it really truly does give you some sort of credibility, because it feels like, you know what, at least they felt compelled enough to tell me this, you know, and it builds a type of trust. And just in case y'all don't know, if somebody truly trusts you, dude, those people will do anything for you. Literally. So if you're ever in a bind, that's the person that trusts you and y'all have a good relationship, done. Literally, they'll be the first one there every single time. But taking charge of your life by taking accountability gives you credibility. And the point in taking charge in your life, one of the points anyways, is to improve your life. Having credibility, having trust, building relationships with people that you can depend on, and being someone that someone else can depend on is a very, very special type of power. And you don't get that type of power from having a title or being blood related. Because let's face it, all of our siblings are not going to run to our side. You know, but you get that type of power from being accountable, making yourself credible, making yourself trustworthy. And it's something you cannot replace with any other feeling, any other perk, any other, I'm not even sure what word I'm trying to find, but you get the point. It's an irreplaceable feeling. It's an irreplaceable bond. And when you break that, or you don't take accountability for the actions that you've caused, then that always comes back to haunt you. You're always watching over your shoulder. You're always trying to figure out, when's the shoe going to drop? You know, it's just always something that's looming over you. You cannot live freely. And the last way that I feel like is a really good, strong way to take charge of your life is to start making sure that you're implementing good habits in it. You know, if you know that you have to be up for work early, go to bed early. If that means that you have to spend a little less time with your spouse sometimes, that's okay. You know, I'm not saying never spend time with your spouse, but put good habits in your life. That's another one right there. People often get swept up in the day-to-day of marriage, and they forget to make it a habit to do stuff together and make it a habit to step away from the kids and the bills and focus on each other. Date nights are so important. Couples classes and couples seminars are just such good habits to build. You can never stop learning how to have a healthy marriage. You can never stop learning how to communicate and connect with your spouse. So continuing to go to seminars or counseling or whatever it is that you feel like you need to have healthy habits set in your marriage, do it. You're not always going to get the perfect result, but if you're doing your absolute best to have the type of relationship that you want to have, having a healthy relationship with that person, then that's all you can do. You've taken as much charge of that situation as you can. Sometimes that means the ball's in their court, and sometimes they surprise us. Sometimes they don't. But if you're doing your absolute best to create healthy habits and follow through with those, then you've taken charge of it. You've done your best. There's nothing more you can do. And every aspect of your life is going to require different habits and different motivations to follow through with those habits. You're going to have days where, it might be a habit to clean the kitchen every single night before you go to bed, so you wake up the next morning and it's clean and you don't have a whole mess you have to deal with. But then one night you're just too tired. It's okay. Be tired, rest, and then make sure that you jump back into the swing of things as quickly as possible, because that's going to be the best way to be consistent and continue to have these habits until the point where you're doing these habits in your sleep, or until a point where the habits need to be adjusted. Say you and your spouse have different work schedules. One of you gets a new job, or, your child has sports and your food schedule is different, because if you have a child that does sports, that you either eat very early or very late, and it's never in between. But it's just very important to build these habits, build good habits, focus on having good habits for starting your morning, or for your skincare, or for whatever it is that you need improvement in your life, or that you need to take charge of, because maybe it's something that is just lacking, something you've not done, but it's not like being affected either way. It's basically in limbo. Just build healthy habits that are catered to you. Again, you cannot live your life in someone else's design. So just make sure that, the habits you're setting are designed to your needs. And just a quick bonus about one more way to take charge of your life: be flexible through seasons of life when these habits need changed. I think one of the biggest ways that some people lose control and they can't get it together in certain seasons is because they have this set plan, and they had these habits, they had these goals, they had this, all of this, and they have this naive belief that life goes the way you plan it, and it doesn't. It never does, literally ever. And so I think a lot of the time, our lack of flexibility with life is something that hinders us. It's very important to build good habits. It's also important to know that life is consistently always changing, and the fact that life is always changing is the only thing consistent about it. So when you're building good habits, you just have to be flexible about the plan, about the habit, about the goal. Your goals may change. There are people who, like myself, fresh out of high school, got married, had kids. I had a goal, and then I did not have the same goal later on, and I ended up divorced from this person that I previously married. And, things change. Life is always going to throw you curveballs. Be flexible about it. Because what happens is when you start getting upset over a situation because it's not going how you want, again, you're losing your power to this situation. You're losing your power to whatever's causing the situation not to go the way you want. And you're holding yourself back because we get in this frenzy. Oh my God, life isn't going the way we want. We start panicking. Then we get overwhelmed. And then the things that we did have taken, like we had already taken charge of, those things are no longer in our control either, because we let them fall to the wayside, or we got so overwhelmed we couldn't deal with them. And so it's just very important to understand that life is not going to go the way you plan. But implementing some of these things and keeping some of these mindsets can really help you take control, take charge, and feel like you are in control of the narrative of your life and what is going on to the biggest extent that a human being can be. Obviously, we don't make the rules, because if we do, somehow severely I messed up my rules and I want a redo. But I'm pretty sure we don't make the rules. So unfortunately, some things are just always going to be out of our control. But when we go into situations with a clear head and a calm head, then we keep the power. When we take accountability for our mistakes that we will inevitably make, because none of us are perfect, we keep the power. When we make good habits for our life and our relationships, and we are grateful for the habits in the seasons that they come in handy, but we're also flexible for the seasons that bring change. We keep the power. We keep ourselves where we can stay focused and deal with situations and handle what is being thrown at us in mature manners, and just not raising the stakes. And at the end of the day, that's what taking charge of your life is about. It's about being able to have the power to make your own decisions. Live your life the way you want to live it. Be free. Be happy. Be healthy. Have healthy boundaries. Have healthy relationships. Like, there's just so much. I could honestly do probably 3, 4, or 5 more episodes of this, because there's so many ways that you can take charge of your life in a nice, kind way that does not raise the stakes and that benefits you in the season that you're in. But I could go on forever, honestly, about it. But this episode is actually way longer than I originally planned. It's longer than any episode I think I've ever done. So you guys are welcome. But I'm going to hop off here. We're going to end it here today because, like I said, I could go on forever. It's so important. Calm head, calm heart, accountability, good habits, flexibility with life's plan. And that's not even the tip of the iceberg, but a good place to start. Thank you for listening to the In Your 30s podcast with your host, Brandea Miller. Hopefully, I will see you guys next week. You can click the show notes and find all of my links to my Amazon store, Facebook, TikTok, and more. And I would be happy to have you on any of those platforms as well. If you have any questions about the In Your 30s podcast, or If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me. I would love to have you. I would love to sit and talk to you about relevant things to anyone in their 30s, whether it be motherhood, whether it be mental health, whether it be your actual physical health, relationships, divorce, grief. We are all ears. There is space for you here, and we would love to talk to you. So feel free to reach out anytime, and I will see you guys next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to the In Your 30s podcast with your host, Brandea Miller. Hopefully, I will see you guys next week. You can click the show notes and find all of my links to my Amazon store, Facebook, TikTok, and more. And I would be happy to have you on any of those platforms as well. If you have any questions about the In Your 30s podcast, or if you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me. I would love to have you. I would love to sit and talk to you about relevant things to anyone in their 30s, whether it be motherhood, whether it be mental health, whether it be your actual physical health, relationships, divorce, grief. We are all ears. There is space for you here, and we would love to talk to you. So feel free to reach out anytime, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.